Real quick, just to let everyone know, it's been talked that I did attend Humboldt State University, but actually I am a graduate from Harvard Science and Computers is the where I went to school. So I'm wearing the colors of Harvard today. So we're going to get right into our next speaker, Jason Oswalt, as affectionately coaches call him Ozzy. A great a great coach, has done a great job down at Amador. He's been down there for years. He's come to camp before as a camper. He's currently there at Amador, and he's done a great job in this COVID era of coaching. Coached John Lester to a 148 800 meters this year under the conditions that people have had to train has been a pretty outstanding thing. So we're going to listen to Coach Ozzy talk about John Lester today. So thank you very much. Ozzy, I'll turn it over to you and let us know what the secret is to coaching a guy to 148.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. First of all, I saw the question down there about the homeless man. I assume that's in reference to me. This is where I actually am right now. This is where I live these days under this bridge. So you're not so far off. But we'll pretend that this is my living room. We'll get started. I'm going to share a presentation with you here. So we'll get that going. And we're going to call it John Lester, the beginning of the story. And hopefully, as we go through, you'll see why I think it's the beginning, just the beginning of the story. If, when we're all done, you guys have any questions for me, I left my email address up here, trackcoachozzy@gmail.com. So feel free to get in touch when we're all done, and I'm happy to hear from anybody. Who am I? We'll keep this short because this presentation isn't really about me. But I'm an Amador Valley alum that was lucky enough to be able to come back and coach at my old high school. When I was in college, I ran cross country and track for Cornell University. Came back and started coaching in 2006. And now in 2020, I've been made famous by the guy that's in the picture on the right. On a personal note, I feel very lucky to be part of the running community. I started running when I was in 8th grade, and most probably of my best friends come from this community, either as high school teammates, college teammates, coaches that I've had, coaches who I've worked with, and really lately all the coaches that I've networked with. And that circle has only grown during COVID. And then, of course, the athletes who I've coached. I hope that, for everybody here, that at some point you feel welcome into this community the same way that I have, and it does the same great things for you that it's done for me. But for now, on with the show, on with John Lester. So in good storytelling, we'll start kind of at the end and then maybe work our way back to the beginning and move through back and forth. And so we're going to start here with the highlights. This is John Lester's junior track season. He got started off, the first big meet that we had, and one that we had before COVID, was the Dan Gabor Invitational. And he kind of opened it up, with the bang. He actually ran we have a sprint festival in the morning where he ran 49.7 in the 400, which was faster than I thought he would run. And then in the evening, he came back and ran 152.06. I don't think of that as really the traditional double, like in a dual meet where, the 4 and the 8 are really close together. He probably ran his 400 before 10 in the morning, and then he ran his 800 at like 7 at night. So he got to go home and really recover. But still, he ran those 2 times on the same day. Within quarantine, he ran 149.36. That was on April 15th. It was a paced race, but it was during shutdown. I wasn't even at it. It was just a time trial that he had told me he was going to run. And I got a phone call that he had run 149, and I didn't even know whether to believe him until I saw the video. Went through a couple of more time trials, but his next real big effort was, the next publicized effort was that 4:08.6 that he ran at the Quarantine Classico. And then the one that really put him on the map was that 148.26 he ran at the Desert Dream Last Hurrah Invitational. He ran a 48.5 as a hand time in the 400. I was not at that one either, but that 48.5, there's a video of it. It looks like it's about right. Could have been a little slower, could have been a little faster. The race I talked about earlier that Michael Granville came to was just, again, a paced time trial at the Amador Valley track where he ran 148.93, which was a negative split. He went 55.09, 53.84. And then we ended his season with a 406.97 mile on the 4th of July. He ran that up in Eugene against Matt Strangio. Obviously, we were shut down for a long time during the track season, and there was a long time when I didn't get to see John. I was at a couple of his time trials, but as far as his workouts, I saw John on March 15th. That was March 14th. That was the first Saturday after, things kind of shut down. And then the next time I saw John was, I think it was on June the 13th. I have that date later on, but it's, I think, June the 13th. And it was the Wednesday before the Desert Dream Last Hurrah Invitational. Believe it or not, we went to Arizona to run this race, and the result wasn't a surprise. It was actually, he was aiming to run 147, and we kind of went there, and despite the fact that the field was so good, we knew he was going to win. And that sounds arrogant in hindsight, and maybe I am misremembering it a little bit and airbrushing it in my mind, but we felt strongly that he was going to win that race. And like I said, the first time that I saw him work out, it was the reason. We had him do 4 200s on the minute, meaning, if he ran the 400 or the 200, and I might have said that wrong. Let me restate. 4 200s on the minute, meaning that if he ran the 240 seconds, he got 20 seconds of rest and started a minute. If he ran 30 seconds, he'd get 30 seconds of rest. And the goal that day was to run them all in 26 seconds. Well, he ran the first one in 24.8. Now think about running a 24.8 and what that's going to take out of you. A lot of people can't run 24.8. And that gave him 36 seconds of rest. And in my mind, I thought maybe I should just tell him to stop and take a walk, and we'll come back in 15 minutes and start over. But based on some of the other things that he'd done, I knew that he couldn't mess it up twice and get anything out of the workout. And so he'd done a couple of workouts where we'd tried sort of starting over, and it didn't really work. And so I thought, you know what, let's just take what we get. So I gave him his 36 seconds of rest and figured it would just be a struggle. Well, he ran the next one in 26.7, and then the next one in 26.2, and then the last one was about 27.5. And the fact that he held it together so well after going out so fast in that workout and having so little rest, I knew he was going to run fast. But I don't really want to make this presentation just about the things that John does that really not anybody else can do at this point. I don't think, it might be cool to look at the times and look at the workouts, and that might be motivational. But I think you guys can take a lot more out of it if we talk about where John came from and what are the things that John does that, allow him to go from being just a really good runner, which, let's not downplay John's talent. John was going to be really good probably no matter what, as long as he stayed healthy. But the things that go from making John a really good runner to the great runner that he's become, and the really great runner that he could become down the road, the things that are going to contribute to that. And so let's first talk about what makes John pretty normal. Look at John's family. John, in the previous picture, you see behind John is Cruz Culpepper. Cruz was really excited when he ran 148.5 behind John. Great sport about it. I'm sure he expected to win, and he didn't. But Cruz was a really good competitor that day. But Cruz is known for having 2 Olympians as parents and all the right genes. Well, John's dad got cut from the high school baseball team for being too slow. This is a story I heard at the end of the season. I don't even know if he'd want me to tell it, but I'm going to anyway. Apparently, John's dad would hit the ball into the outfield something that should be a bloop single, but he'd get thrown out at first base by the outfielder because he was too slow to get to first. So he's not getting his speed from his dad. His mom picked up running later in life, and she's, I don't know, she doesn't really compete a lot, but she's out, she runs. Potentially, if she had run in high school, she could have been a college runner. I don't know. I mean, maybe she could have been really good, and maybe that's where he gets it from. But he did not grow up in a family that really, where his parents were putting a lot of pressure on him to be a great track and field runner or even athlete. His sister was a couple years older than him, and she ran cross country for 1 year, but she was also a swimmer. And so she ran cross country in the fall, went to the pool in the spring, and her teammates in the pool convinced her to do water polo. So that was the only season that she ran. John's got a sophomore brother named Tim, who's a really good sprinter. Or he was a sophomore last year. He'll be a junior this year. Early on in his sophomore year, he ran 11:28 in the 100, 22.6 in the 200, 50.81. And if the season had gone, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, Tim was gonna run under 50 seconds in the 400. I wouldn't have been surprised if he ran under 49. So that's there is more athletic talent in the Lester family. And then Tim has a twin brother whose interests are not really in athletics at all. He plays in the band. He's really strong academically. He's part of a couple of academic clubs. And then there's another younger brother who's about 10, who's probably the real talent in the family. He'll probably run 144 as a junior. You know, big family. You know, John's got lots of siblings, different interests. Definitely not a whole lot of pressure to be a great track and field runner. He just happens to be fast. You may know the story about John's freshman year. He did not run cross country as a freshman. He played football. Actually, he grew up in middle school, elementary school. He was playing football. On the football team, he was a kick returner and a running back, and he'd tell you himself he's not going to be offended when I say he's not very good. Again, his dad was his football coach going through middle school, but his dad didn't say, like, hey, it wasn't like his dad thought he needed to be a football player. Actually, by the time he got done with freshman football, John's dad was probably the one who wanted him to do cross country. So the story that I heard was when John was playing running back, they'd always run, the play that they'd run is this, either a sweep to the right or a sweep to the left. And his dad noticed, he said, John, if you cut that back, you know, he would get tackled after a few yard gain or run out of bounds. And he said, John, if you cut that back, you're going to score a touchdown. You're the fastest guy on the field. He said, I know that, but coach won't let me cut it back. He says, I've got to run the route, you know, or run the play the way it's designed and not improvise. And it turns out that because John's dad had been coaching football, he and this coach were pretty good friends. And he wasn't trying to coach the other guy's team, but he said, hey, I noticed that, you know, John could cut it back and you recognize it. John knows you recognize it and I recognize it. So why don't you let him? And he said, well, we're trying to get John hit because it seems like he doesn't like to get hit. And so we want him to run right into the defense and take a couple hits because, you know, football after this won't work very well if he can't get hit. And I think in John's dad's mind, that was kind of the end, because if you don't like contact, football is not the sport for you. John ran as a sprinter as a freshman. He ran the 100 in 12:65 when legal. His 200 was 24:98. His 400 was his best time by far, 52.06. But his season ended at league in the open 4. He continued on with our 4x4 and eventually had a split of, I think it was under 51. It could have been, you know, they're all hand times because they're splits, but maybe 51 flat, just under 51. So one of the things that you might notice, you know, that's good. Those are good times for a freshman sprinter, but they're not great. Probably most teams have a freshman who can at least run faster than this in the 100, probably faster than this in the 200. You're not going to get a freshman every year that runs 52.06, but it's not so uncommon that it doesn't happen. And I look at this and say, man, what are the chances, you know, what is the possibility that John, being as good as he was, never ever runs an 800, never runs cross country, and then we never see this. He's just the next guy that runs, you know, 49 flat as a senior. Maybe faster, maybe not, but John had good speed, but there was nothing to indicate from this year that he was going to do the things that he did. John wanted to be good. Even as a freshman, John wanted to be good. He only came out for track because his football coach said, if you're going to be a football player and you're going to play the positions you play, you need to get faster. But once he got out to the track, he wanted to be good. That season, we had two pretty good sprinters in front of him. They were both juniors at the time. They were both 400-meter runners. One of them was an athlete, Elijah Wheatman, whose name you may know because he placed pretty high at NCS a couple of times, who did all the work that anybody could ask. Sometimes it wasn't the smartest. He didn't always do the smartest work, but he woke up, lived, breathed, ate, and slept track and field. And that's how he got good. We had the other sprinter was a football player whose priority was football. And that athlete is currently playing college football, so it worked out for him. Really talented athlete, basically the kind of guy that could roll out of bed and run 50-point low or 49 high. And that's essentially what he did, is he rolled out of bed, didn't do much work, and he ran 50-point low or 49 high. And so John kind of had the choice of which person to follow. And it turns out that the football player who John looked up to because he wanted to be a football player himself and was also a charismatic guy, pretty funny, I guess, if you're not trying to coach him and have steam coming out your ears. John followed that guy a lot. It was fortunate that John was a freshman and still a little bit afraid, so the sprint coach could snap him back and get him ready to work. And when the sprint coach told him to work, he went to work. But when heads were turned, there's a lot of times where John wasn't necessarily doing all of the right things. So fast forward to his sophomore cross country season. His dad, and I think really some of the kids in the distance team, and really one of the dads on the distance team, Kevin Gray. Jack Gray was one of our top cross country runners over the last few years, and his dad really put pressure on John to come out and try cross country. And I think that's really the reason why he came out, is because there were a lot of people telling him how good he could be. And those people weren't me, because all John told me is how he was looking so forward to football. And I just think you can't. Did I think he could do it? Yeah, but I think at that point, like if you try to take somebody's favorite sport away and then it doesn't work out, that ends up not looking so good. So those kids that have a different sport that they play, I'm happy to talk to them about cross country, but I try not to put any pressure on them to come out and do cross country. But first day of summer practice, he arrives and says, I think I'm going to try this. We basically started out John like a brand new distance runner. He ran less than 30 miles a week that first year. He did come, he was diligent. He came to every practice, but we had a pretty hardworking group. It was like kind of his freshman situation in sprints, where we had a really strong top 5, and 4 of the guys were totally in on it. And we had a 5th guy who wanted to clown around sometimes. And when heads were turned, a lot of times John would gravitate towards the guy that was clowning around. And, we had those conversations, and he'd have the right answers, but actions didn't always meet his answers. That season, he averaged less than 30 miles a week, but he was good enough that he was immediately challenging for a varsity spot. In our team time trial that we have in August, I think he was our 8th runner. And then by the time our first race came about, somebody was hurt, so he ran varsity right away. By midseason, he had run 16:49 at the Clovis Invite. It really took off for him. This was the year we had the fires, where everybody was very interrupted in their training. Everybody was creative, finding their ways to get their training done, but it wasn't what anybody mapped out for how they were going to train those last couple of weeks. And he had a nice breakthrough at NCS. He was our number 4 runner, and he ran 15:54. And I think that this was a turning point for him, not only because he ran well, but because we missed the state meet by 1 point. And that runner who kind of spent his time clowning around had a really bad race for us. And I wouldn't say that it was all his fault, because most of us ran pretty flat. Really, John was the only one to have a great race. And then one of our original top five was missing. He had hurt his foot at the EBAL championships. So we went from 6 deep to 5 deep, and we ran pretty flat that day, except for John, who ran really well. But seeing that result, I think really kind of fired John up. And come the next track season, he found the right people to follow. And so one thing that we've got here in our program, we have a deep history in the 800 meters. For a long time, people could follow Dan Gabor. Dan Gabor, the meet's named after him, but he's Amador Valley's lone record holder, lone state champion, and he was a state champion and school record holder at 150. A few years later, we had Connor McKinnon, who spent his time chasing down Dan Gabor, didn't quite get there, but he ran 151. And I think this might have helped me as much as it helped John, in that we've had an athlete who was trying to break 150 before. For Connor, it didn't quite happen, but it gave me the frame of reference that, okay, this is how we're going to train a guy who's pretty good at the 800. But I think in the middle, we have Monica Van Wiegen, who was a 2:11 800 runner, and she's also sort of legendary in our program as just the consummate leader. She, always kept the team together, and the athletes on our team know who she is. And again, 800-meter runner. But I think John's probably primary mentor was Aiden Boyle, who had been to the state meet the year before John started running the 800. Aiden got in on an at-large time. He ran 153 at the state. He ran 154 to get in, but he ran 153 at the state meet. And Aiden is now at the Air Force Academy. He's definitely a disciplined guy. All of his habits were good, and John just learned. He said, once cross country didn't work out the way he wanted to, I'm going to do exactly what Aiden Boyle does, and sort of that led the way for John to do the things that he did. So we get into John's sophomore track season, and everything got better. He ran 50.34 in the 400. He did that to take second at league. And he barely ran the open 4. He only ran a couple of them, but he got down there. He started his first 800. He ran 2:03.84. That was at the Dan Gabor invite. He went 65.58. And so we knew that there was plenty more. And, this is the thing that not everybody can do. You're not going to come out. Most people are not going to come out and have this progression in the 800. He went 2:03, 158.11. I have to thank Chris Williams for that, because that was at the Dublin Distance Fiesta, and John actually missed his heat. John went down to check in. Somehow he missed check-in, and Chris could have said, you know what, you're an idiot. You're out of luck. That happens at a lot of meets. I wouldn't have blamed him. But instead, Chris said, just running the next one, plugs him into the next heat, and I think he won the heat, ran 158.11. He ran 156.79. That was at West Coast Relays. 156.74 was at Arcadia. 155.4 was at SAC MOCs. He ended up winning the E-ball meet in 156.84. I put a star next to that because that was about 20 minutes after the 400 where he ran 50.34. He PR'd at NCS Tri-Valley, 154.33. At MOC Finals, he ran 155.16 to win. He was a little bit wet that day. It wasn't really raining hard for his race. PR'd at state trials, 154.19, and then he finished 7th at the state meet, 152.99. And so you don't have a much better first season. He only ran a real serious 1600 once. He ran 429, going 70, 70, 70, 59. And at the state meet, he ran 48.8 in the 4x4 trials to help our team. We PR'd by 4 seconds that day to make finals. So pretty much a perfect sophomore track season. I don't know how this slide always gets into my presentations. It sneaks in. I agree with it. I'm a Cornell guy, but I'm sorry, not really. So John has the season that he has. And we get into cross country, and you might think, okay, 152.99 as a sophomore, what do we do different? You know, how do we treat him, especially in his cross country season, to really build him up for track? And the reality is we didn't do that. You know, in our program, we do tailored training to different athletes, mostly by the amount that they run. Every once in a while, our newer athletes will do a different workout, but than our veterans, because you know they're not ready for something. But John basically did all the same workouts as all of our other cross country runners. Sometimes a rep or two less because his mileage was still a little bit lower. You know, we got him into into about 40 miles a week in cross country instead of 30, but still he wasn't doing anything huge. But from all that strength work he had done in the previous year, he had some pretty substantial improvements. We had our e-ball race at Hayward this year, and he ran 15:26 there for ninth. We ran 15:34 to place sixth at NCS. It was a little bit warmer of a day that day than it was at e-balls. He was pissed off about his state meet race. He ran 16:05. I think if he had run 15:59, he probably doesn't even run Foot Locker. He just wanted to get under 16. And I know that he was upset that, you know, he had been running kind of side by side with another athlete on our team, Ewan Houston, and Ewan Houston ran 15:39 that day. And so when Ewan ran away from him, I know it pissed him off. So he went to Foot Locker and he ran 15:49, where he got 17th place, or excuse me, 17th place. I don't know why I said that. 79th place. So I actually think that it wasn't, you know, they ran the rain course at Mount Sac. I don't know that 15:49 was really any better than the 16:05, but he liked the number, so he left cross country season pretty happy about it. Getting into our preseason, which, you know, in our program, I don't meet much with the athletes during the preseason. So I try to give them very generic work that they can do on their own, or I mean, I want them to do it with the team, but I want it to be things that they don't have to think about, how am I supposed to do this? So for the most part, during the winter, they just have a Monday through Sunday routine that they'll follow week in and week out. It's the same thing. So we do speed development once a week, where they'll do hill sprints, give them 4 minutes rest. The hill sprints are just 8 seconds up. We do weights that day. I just took a typical week from John. This was week 5 of his preseason. I think his preseason was 8 weeks. So it's probably you can see the volume says about 45 miles. By the end of the preseason, he was probably doing about 50 miles. Like a lot of the coaches in the room, we do our volume in minutes. And so it's not exactly 45 miles, but just kind of counting up the minutes that he ran and knowing how fast he ran, about 45 miles this week. And he was probably over 50 miles a couple times going into track. But we did speed development on Monday. We'd always do tempo miles on Tuesday. I like tempo miles during track season because, one, they do them on the track. 2, especially during the winter where I don't get to see them. If they mess it up and run the beginning too fast, they get, you know, after they finish the mile, they get a minute to recover and correct. Or if I just had them do a 20 or 25 minute tempo run and they're in over their heads after 6 minutes, it's a wasted effort. So John would do 4 to 5 of them. We had athletes that would do 6. John would aim for 5, but every once in a while he knew after 4 he wasn't feeling good. It was time to cut it off. He's a pretty good judge of that. And he'd run them in about 5:30. At the beginning of the preseason, they were a little bit slower. By the end, this is about where they were. Maybe the last 1 or 2 would be in the high 5:20s. Wednesday would just be a recovery run. Thursday, they would do this workout where they do 2 sets of 6 200s with a 10-minute steady state in between. And I didn't give them times. These are the times that John would report, but I just told them in the first set, do the first 3 pretty easy, do the second, do number 4 and 5 medium, and the last one a little bit harder. And then in the second set, do 2 easy, 2 medium, and 2 hard. And hard it was understood that wasn't a sprint. It was just a good, faster effort. And so generally, John's second set, the easy ones would be a little bit faster than the easy ones from the first set, and the same thing all the way through. And we would do weights that day too. Friday was a low mileage day, but it wasn't a low activity day. We would do a strength circuit where basically we do 13 exercises. They're all body weight exercises. They'll do them for anywhere between 30 seconds or 20 seconds to a minute, depending on the exercise. They're all by time. We focus on good form in the exercises, but once they have good form, we want them to do as many of them as they can. So things like step ups or bicycles. We do some squats in there, things like that. Just with body weight. And in between each exercise, they'll run about 100 meters. I think it's done a lot for us in our program with injury prevention. So their heart rate is high for a pretty long time that day. When you count up the amount that they run, it's really not that much volume. So I say it's about a 4-mile day, but somehow it's going to be worth a little bit more than that. John's long run this winter, and this week he did 9 to 10 miles. I think he probably got it up to 11 or 12 at its peak. And he would do a Sunday recovery run on his own. Some of the guys will get together and do that, but John would do that by himself, just 5 to 6 miles. And so if you look at this training, there's nothing that really sticks out. I don't think there's no secrets in here. There's nothing super special about it. It's just, he's doing work every day. People ask us about the weights that we do in our program. So John's weight room work is the same as everybody's weight room work in our program. They lift twice a week. We always lift after fast days, and we try to do our harder lifts, or we try to lift on our harder days. So usually we lift the day before a race, and then we lift on a hard workout day. So we do 3 sets of 3 reps on the bench press with 3 minutes recovery. John would do about 135 pounds on his bench press. And then we do 3 sets of 3 reps of deadlift, followed immediately by 5 box jumps. So they do the deadlifts, then the box jumps, then they take the 3 minutes recovery. He would lift about 225 pounds on his deadlift. Most of this program comes from a book called Underground Secrets to Faster Running by Barry Ross. It's a real quick read, about 90 pages, if you're more interested in that than what I've shared. So that's what John did in the off season. And then we got into the regular season, BC, before COVID, that led up to his Dan Gabor race. We still did speed development, but instead of being on the hills, we moved to the track. We do it flat. So it's less about strength than it is about max velocity. And still we just do 4 by 50 meters with 4 minutes recovery. We continue to tempo workout. A lot of times that would still be our tempo miles, but we'd switch it up a little bit. We'd keep a long run. We'd still do strength circuits. There was more variety in the race pace workouts. So one of the days he did tempo, instead of doing tempo miles, we did 3 by 2K with some 400s afterwards. He did run a 2-mile time trial. It was in a scrimmage that we had against Dublin, and Skyline was there. And there were a couple teams there, I forget. And Chris Middleton Pearson ran away from him, but he ran 9:42.99. It was the first time he'd ever run a 2-mile on the track. February 27th was one of 2 real workouts that he did before Dan Gabor. He did 20 by 200 at 32 with 100 meters jogging recovery, also at 32. He did that with you in Houston. I wasn't sure how he'd feel in that workout. I know I watched it very closely and thought if he wasn't looking good, I was going to pull him out after 16, but he looked fine. He did it. It was good. And then March 2nd, this was the Monday before Dan Gabor, he did a mile at 5:30, and we kind of cut it down. There was a tempo mile, and then 1,000 and 800 to 600 to 400 and a 200. The reason why I gave him so much rest after the mile wasn't because he needed it, but we had some new runners on the team who I wanted to be able to give instructions to. So that was John being part of the team and taking that 3:30 as I explained the next part of the workout. And then you can see the rests got less and less as the reps got shorter. So we did the longest rep down to the shortest rep, but we also went from slowest to fastest, and the rest went from the longest to the shortest. And that's what he did before he ran 152.06 and 49. One thing I should mention, not back to his preseason, John did not have a smooth preseason, and neither did most of our team. Our cross-country team had the best cross-country season we've ever had. We finished 8th at the state meet and really ran very well, but it was very emotionally taxing, and the athletes came out of it really tired, and some injuries started to show up. Even the week of Foot Locker, our number 1 guy felt something in his hamstring on Wednesday before Foot Locker. We decided not to go. But John had a couple of little twinges. So I would guess that of those 8 weeks of preseason that he did, he took extra days off probably in 4 or 5 of those weeks. And I know he was worried about it. I got to the point where I was a little bit worried about it, but I knew how much more work he'd done in the fall. So we just kind of tried to talk about that. Like, we knew he was stronger than he'd ever been. Missing a day or two, even if it was a day or two a week, in order to come in fresh and healthy, we thought was more beneficial than trying to force some fitness that was possibly going to lead to an injury. And John's willingness to be patient with that, I don't know if he would have gotten injured. Nobody knows that. But his willingness to be patient with that and not force the issue, I think, led to a lot of his success down the road, and probably was a big part of why he was able to stay fresh into July. So COVID happens, the beginning of COVID. We got news on Friday the 13th that basically things were going to start to shut down. We were allowed to practice on the 14th, and John did a good workout on the 14th. Between March 15th and April 7th, our facilities were closed, and he didn't do anything on the track. He did speed development in parks, strength circuits in parks. He did a fartlek run. Everything was done by time. John still had access to weights because I mentioned Elijah Wheatman earlier. Well, his dad moved his weight set to the garage and invited John in to lift weights in his garage, and they had a whole disinfecting sort of protocol that they'd follow. He would go into the garage and not see anyone and clean it all up when he was done. So John ran 149 on April 15th. He did one track workout prior to that between March 15th and that. So for a month, he did a 500, 2 300s, and 2 150s, all with 2 minutes recovered. It was a pretty good workout. He ran the 300s in 40 and the 150s in 20, but he was supposed to run this 568. So he missed, he was a little bit of a wuss on the first one, made the rest of it easier. I did not expect him to run 149 on that first time trial. Just based on the work he had done, I thought he'd run 154. Challenges. What did we face during COVID? We faced a constantly changing schedule. We faced limited use of the track, and he had to do everything on his own. So the absence of coaches led to some miscommunications. There were a couple times where we gave him a workout. He thought he was supposed to do one thing, and my intention was something else. And probably that was on my end, my fault. John he's very smooth when he runs, but there's some things with his form that we need to work on, and it's really hard to work on those things if I can't be there. And then it's hard to make adjustments to the workout. So, if a workout's not going well, it's hard to change it. So we were very conservative in the way we gave workouts for a long time, because if it wasn't going well, for example, a lot of times we'll do a workout with mid-distance runners where they'll do 6 by 600. But if it's not going well, a lot of times they'll get through 4 and we'll say, okay, we're going to make the last 2 of them 400s. So that they can do 2 good 400s rather than 2 bad 600s on the back end. But we couldn't do that. So the workouts were a little bit hard to do, hard to keep motivation. And I'm sure a lot of people lost motivation during COVID. But John would swear up and down that COVID helped him run faster, that it was an advantage for him. And that outlook is something that was a huge part of his success. Ask him about during COVID, he'd tell you about how he could train on his own timetable, how he was able to sleep more. I don't know why COVID helped him eat healthier, but he swears it did. The schoolwork was easier, so he wasn't so stressed about it. Grades couldn't change, and he trusted our process. You hear the word trust the process a lot, but there's lots of processes to trust. He trusted the process that we were going through, and he trusted it really well. And so it allowed him to not question things so much during COVID. I've worked at another running camp where we did a Q&A with the counselors. And there was a counselor named Jake Lang who goes to Williams College now. And they asked him, what do you do to stay motivated throughout a season? And this was from a camper who had trouble. Like, everybody's excited on the first day. Everybody's excited for the postseason. And, it's hard to be excited sometimes in the middle of the season. And I think this was a year where we definitely saw that. It was hard to be excited in April and May when races were all canceled. And his answer is one of the best I've ever heard. He says, "I don't work to stay motivated." You can read this quote. He says, "I don't work to stay motivated. Motivation is a fickle mistress. When she's with you, training is energetic and easy to push through. When she's not, there's no pretending. Discipline is the rock. It's always there. I have my routines and I know my goals. That means I know the pathway to those goals. Whether motivation is on my side on a given day or not, I know I can rely on my discipline." And I think that was the key with John. There's no way that he woke up every morning excited to do the things that we were asking him to do, but he knew what he wanted to accomplish. And so he went out and did the work. So I know that I'm taking a long time, so I've got these workouts that he did, and we'll go through those real quick. But if you just sort of glance through these workouts that he did, these are the things that, not everybody can just wake up and do. If you're trying to run 148, this is not the place to start. The things that he was doing. The place to start is kind of where John started, that long buildup, that decision to be committed, that decision to build the right habits. And hopefully one day, after doing all of that work, you can start to put in some sessions like these, which are just ridiculous. But eventually we got John into the Quarantine Classico. And at that point in the season, we were sharpening, and we didn't know if that would be his last race or if there would be more to follow. So, his mileage dropped. We did lots of fast work. We got away from the tempo running. We kept lifting. But you can see that his sessions, he went to practice and did a 300, a 200, and a 100. That was one of the places we miscommunicated. It was supposed to be a 150, but he didn't. And all the times written here, I wasn't at these workouts, so these are just what he reported, but I have no reason to think that they weren't as accurate as he could be. One of the ones that stuck out to me on, after the Quarantine Classico, where he ran 408.9, this should say 6 200s. It says 4 with 5 minutes recovery, 23, 24, 24, 24, 24, 25. Just a few weeks earlier, he had done the same workout, and I think it's in here where he went 24, 23, 24, 25, 25, 25, and he threw up. And when he talked about this one on May 27th, he talked about how easy it was. And if you see those times, like, I don't care that he had 5 minutes rest. To talk about that as easy is quite the statement. Not every workout was great. On May 31st, I knew he was fit after this workout. We had him do a 600 followed by a minute rest and then a 200 as fast as he could. And we gave him 20 minutes to run a 600. So the 600s were supposed to be in 120. He ran the first one in 119, but after a minute, he came back and ran 29 seconds. And had he called me after that first set like he was supposed to and told me what he did, I'd have told him to not do the second 600. But he didn't call me. He came back and ran 120. So we had a long conversation about this 29 and why that happened. Because if he could come back and run 120, he needed to be able to run faster than 29. But the 119 and the 120 on the 600s, those show that he was really fast and ready to go. We continued sharpening up until the Desert Dream. Like I said, I already told you about the workout we did. It was April 10th, where he did that 4 200s on the minute. But I would say overall, we had a historic non-season. And if you look at, these are all of the athletes that accomplished really elite things, including Darius Kipyego just a couple of days ago ran 148.82. He was in the Desert Dream with John. He ran 151. And Brandon Miller just ran his first 800 of the year a couple of days ago, also in a different race, and ran 149.35. But you've got men and women running extremely fast times. These would be elite times any year. Leo Dasbach broke 4 minutes, Cruz Culpepper 148.5, and then 408 at altitude. He also ran 4 flat indoors, but that was before. All of these marks that I've written down happened after COVID started. People know about Nico Young's 1350, and you wonder, did they stick to their plan because they are good? Or did they stick to their plan, or are they good because they refused to give up on that plan? All of these guys, all these men and women were good before the season started. but there were a lot of really good athletes who didn't do anything this season. And so, I think that's the question. And that was one of the things that I really learned from this season is just, I probably, as a high school athlete or even a college athlete, I probably would have been one of the ones to give up on it. And it was just extremely inspirational to watch John and have him just communicating with me every day on all the things that he was doing for an opportunity that may never come about. So so much credit to him for those things. And, to accomplish all those things really on your own for the most part with just a daily phone call or calling me every couple of days to figure out what to do next. And he communicated well enough that I could make adjustments to the training plan as necessary. I knew, even though I wasn't there, I knew exactly what was happening. The season kind of came to an end on July 4th. I told you about how much he trusted our process. On July 6th, that trust got put to the test where we had made a decision to finish the season on July 4th in Eugene. July 6th, he got an email or a phone call or something from a meet that was going to take place on July 27th, where they wanted him to come out and run an 800 against Brandon Miller. It was actually this race from the other day where Brandon Miller ran 149.35. And, John didn't want it. John wanted to do it. And, at that point, I explained to him and to his family why I thought it wasn't the best idea for him to do it. And I was, it was one of the, I wouldn't say it was super stressful, but it was one of the places where coach and athlete had a minor disagreement. And I really appreciate that eventually he said, okay, I understand and I won't do it. That's it was mature because John wanted to go chase records. My feeling was that John is in his second year of distance running. He started his preseason in December to extend those to another 3 weeks of really hard training. It might have worked. He might have run 147. But I also saw the possibility that he would get hurt or just fizzle out and not run fast. And then it was going to delay us from being able to start again. So he trusted me, and now it's my job to come through and help him accomplish his goals next season. Next chapters. John's doing everything that he has control over to be successful in the sport, but nobody is promised success in the sport. He's been very open about his goals. He wants to break Michael Granville's record next season. He wants to break 4 in the mile. He wants to break 47 in the quarter. He wants to qualify for the Olympic trials in the 800. Those are his 2021 goals. I don't know if he's going to accomplish them. Probably somewhere along the line, something's going to go wrong. It would be awesome if he did, or even if he accomplished one of those goals, it would be a pretty awesome season. But where I see John is, we talked about how we've told the beginning of the story. I think he's put the habits in place, whether he is successful in the short term or not, to really grow as an athlete and have a long, successful career. And I hope we're all hearing about him years from now about what he's doing in college and hopefully after wearing the United States jersey. So I know I've taken more time than what I was allotted. It's 11 o'clock right now. But I want to thank all of you for sticking around, paying attention. I hope that not only are you excited about the things John's done, but his story sort of opens up the idea of possibilities for you. And, we may have a very chaotic fall. I mean, we are already having a very chaotic fall, but that his story motivates you to stick to the plan and to realize that sometime racing is going to start again. I don't know when. I hope that it's I hope we actually get to start in December and we get to race in January, February, March, and all the way through. But if not, it'll happen at some point. And, I think John and all those other athletes who I highlighted are a testament to the fact that if you put in the work, there can be a great result. I found this quote from Pat Tyson. He says, number one thing you can do here is gain a passion for running. It becomes so much easier to do all those things if you really love running. Love the morning, love the trail, love the pace on the track. And, if you're somebody like John Lester that happens to get really good at it, that's cool too. I have my email on here again in case you missed it the first time, in case there's anything you want to ask later. I'm extremely receptive to answering your questions. I'd love to. Like I said, I love being part of the running community, and everybody in this room is part of that, and I'm happy to interact with you. Kevin, before I send it back to you, I'd like to ask you a favor, if you could at some point, because we're not up at Humboldt this year. If you have a chance to get in touch with Shirley and tell her I said hello, that would be awesome. But I'm going to pass it back after one more product placement. Thanks, Hoka, for putting this thing on too. My Hoka water glass.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
Ozzy, I'll let her know, Ozzy.
Jason, go ahead and unshare, and then we'll split screen to do some Q&A here from our audience.
Cool.
So we've got one question here that a little bit off of the topic of John Lester, but what was your college running experience like? And what did you go to your particular school to do?
I went to a great school. I went to Cornell. They're known for their academics, but if I'm being honest, I went there to try to run fast, which I ran a little bit faster than I did in high school, but I didn't run really fast. I was a 4:19, 1600 meter runner in high school. I was a 4:18 miler in college. Got better at the longer distances. Most of it probably my fault, spreading myself too thin. I did come out with a degree. I loved my college experience. I still, I don't put any of my shortcomings and failures on anybody but me. And so I remain in, I have a good relationship with the program still. Some of my best friends are my college teammates, and I still, interact with all my college coaches. So I loved it. It was, running on the East Coast is different than running here because it's cold. Those winters are something to get used to. I had family close by. My grandparents lived close. So even though I was far away from my parents out here, I was never far away from a home base of sorts. But I loved it. It let me do a lot of things in the sport and see a lot of things that, even though I wasn't running as well as I wanted to, that I never would have had the chance to do.
All right. Abdul Salam Raja asks, what kind of strength workouts other than core, weight room, etc., did John do for 800 meter strength? And did he do these during the cross country season?
So, I put up the details of his weight room work. He was doing twice a week. He was doing bench press and deadlifts and some box jumps. It's basically the same progression in cross country season that we use. Over the last couple of weeks, we decreased to doing 1 rep where we leave the weight about the same and we just ask him to move the bar a little bit faster. But twice a week in the weight room, we lift heavy. We do core. I mean, you said other than core, but we do core about 4 or 5 times a week. We do strength circuits. I didn't give all the details on those, but those are just body weight things. Those are mostly in place to keep all of our athletes injury free. And those components of the training are in there in the fall too. The speed development is in there in the fall. All of those things that we touch on, we hit in the fall and the spring, and just trying to get stronger. And when we're in the weight room lifting heavy, I think everything strength wise is designed for injury prevention, but we have other motives in the weight room when we're lifting heavy. We want to become more powerful.
160.
So one more thing about strength training. Do you guys use Olympic lifts? And do you try to have a progression in terms of the weight that they're lifting, just like you might have a progression in terms of the volume that an athlete's running or the paces?
We do not use Olympic lifts, and the deadlift is as close as we get. So I guess the deadlift builds into all the Olympic lifts, but for us, we have too many people in the weight room to where I'd feel comfortable trying to teach that and monitor that. And so, we don't. I think the Olympic lifts are great if you know how to do them and you have people to watch it. But, I do have the fear of people getting hurt in the weight room. I think that's the last thing we want to see. It's a small piece of the program. We make sure that kids are taking enough rest. We are asking them to lift a fairly high percentage of their 1 rep max, which we will, we tested a few times, probably twice a season, just to give us a guideline. But we also understand that after a hard workout, when they're in the weight room, they may be too tired to really base their lifting on that percentage on that given day. So we do not tell them you must lift this much weight. here's a guideline, see how it feels on the day.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of questions here. I'm going to try to put them together. So is John using the cross country season just as kind of a base for track? And what kind of mileage are you looking at for this coming cross country season for him?
So let me get at a clarification on the first part of your question. As far as using cross country season for track, are we talking about all of his cross country seasons or particularly the 2021 cross country season?
Yeah, it's the questions from Craig Stern. He says, is John focusing on training for cross country season or using cross country to train for track?
Well, last year in his mind, he's using cross country to train for track, but he understood where we were as a team last year and what we wanted to accomplish. And he was totally bought into cross country. He was peaking for cross country. At the same time, the day before the Nike Invitational last year was when he told me all of his track goals. So his brain is in the spring. For this season, his track season, his cross country season is going to be very minimal because, some of us coaches have talked about this, but peaking for 5K on March 27th and then an 800 in June is going to be a really difficult thing to do. So this fall, I see him running just a couple of cross country races, and he may not be peaking for any of them. But we do plan to have him running in the postseason, at least at this point, and doing as much as he can for the team and for himself. But our goals are in the spring.
Henry Jaffe asks, did John show any promise in middle school, or did you not see it or were aware of it until high school?
I believe that he did show some promise, but I didn't know him. So, from some of the other kids on the team, I think in the mile run, he ran about 5:30 off no training. He ran on some 4x8s, again, very little training. The 4x8 teams were pretty good. I don't know what he contributed to those. The kids seemed to know that he was a pretty good runner before he showed up and ran track, which is why the kids tried to get him out running cross country. But I don't really know the details of his middle school. I usually don't meet the kids on our team until they arrive on our team, and usually try to not have our kids that are in the program really sort of be too excited about the freshmen, because sometimes the freshman's good and gets really good, but some of the eighth graders that were good weren't any good and become great, and some just lose interest and don't keep doing sports. So I don't pay too much attention until they get into our program.
All right. Thank you, Jason. We're going to move on. I know there's a few other questions we didn't get to, but we're going to wrap things up this morning. Kevin's going to give us a little rundown here, and then I think we're going to conclude with a little visit with Jamie Harris on our traditional Wednesday run up in Arcata. So thank you, Jason, for an outstanding presentation. Kevin?
You're welcome. And if your question was one of the ones that didn't get answered, feel encouraged to use my email address, and I'll get back to you.
So